So unfortunately, I am still experiencing a lot of issues with firmware 3.02 and in general, firmware 3.0 from Sony. I really didn't want to make another video because I feel like I've made enough videos of this firmware issue, and it's definitely an issue, and it has basically broken my Sony A7s3. Now, not necessarily broke it as in it doesn't turn on anymore, but it's not very reliable and I no longer trust it, which is a shame because it was my favorite camera that worked perfectly. That was flawless. I used it for everything. So let's dive into two new issues that I just found out that I think are pretty major. Okay, so the first one is in regards to the 3.5 millimeter jack for your mics. This is a really crazy, really bizarre issue that I just noticed, but it happened right after 3.02. And I just recently found out because I don't always use a 3.5 millimeter jack for my mic, and sometimes I just go directly into the hot shoe, the Sony hot shoe, so I'll use the Sony digital mic. And it just so happened, coincidentally, I was using a Sony digital mic for the last couple weeks. I didn't know, but after 3.02, I have no audio, absolutely no audio input to the 3.5 millimeter jack. I've checked my settings, my audio's on in the menus and all that stuff, but nothing with the 3.5 millimeter jack works anymore. So essentially, this 3.5 millimeter jack is dead. So I don't know if anyone else is experiencing this. Firmware 3.02 definitely did something where now the inputs don't work. Again, this was never an issue before. Literally right before the firmware update, everything was working fine. So it gets a lot worse. I just found out it's not just the 3.5 millimeter jack, but it's also the internal mic. The internal mic doesn't work anymore as well. And as for those of you that follow my channel, that subscribe to my channel, you guys know that I've done a ton of videos on microphones recently, and very recently I did one on the Sennheiser MKE 600 where we compared the 3.5 millimeter jack versus XLR input and the audio quality. So I know for a fact before 3.02 my audio was working just fine, and before that something really bad recently happened. If you guys are having this issue, I'm really curious. If you are, please leave a comment below. I'll tell you what Sony said to me when I contacted them a little bit later. The next issue, this one essentially is a little bit worse than everything else I reported, and even a 3.5 millimeter jack, the recent one, but now the camera freezes while recording. It will record, you'll hit record after the memory card delay. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out my other video because there's more issues like memory card issues, overheating, autofocus, and things like that. But essentially what's going on now is it takes a while for the camera to recognize the memory card, doesn't matter what memory card anymore. And then when you hit record, after the camera finally recognizes it, it will record for, I don't know, it could be 10 seconds, could be a minute, it could be 10 minutes, and then it will freeze. You will see on the screen like a frozen frame of whatever it is that you're recording. That's how I find out. And that's it. Like, it won't get out of that. You have to remove the battery in order to wake up the camera again and reset it. And yes, the footage is lost. This is incredibly frustrating. I tried to record this video right now using my Sony A7s3. It did it 4 times. I got fed up because every single time the recording is lost. The first time it did it within about 25 seconds, I want to say, to like 40 seconds. And then the other 3 times it did it, it was all over the place. One time I think it was within like 10 seconds. Another time it was like halfway through the video, and then another time it was like right when I was at the end of the video. So yeah, I lost the footage, so I had to redo this video 4 or 5 times now. I got frustrated and just took out my Pocket 3. Decided to just do it on my Pocket 3 and get this video done. I can replicate both of these issues. So the mic thing is very easy to replicate. It never works now. It's dead. That's it. So doesn't matter what mic I'm using, it won't work. Only way I can get audio into the camera is through the hot shoe, or it's the hot shoe, the digital hot shoe. The camera freezing thing, I can't replicate it per se, like time-wise, but it does happen. And if I just hit record and let it go, it's going to happen. And then I'm just filming it with like an iPhone to show you guys. I started seeing issues with firmware 3.0. With 3.01, I didn't see anything additional. It just didn't fix the Bluetooth or Wi-Fi issue. And then with 3.02, everything went to hell. I'll tell you a little bit more about my camera, just so you guys can get some background, because some of you are like, you know, you've upgraded and nothing bad has happened. I am very happy for you, trust me. I don't want anyone to experience any of these issues. Again, this was my favorite camera, so this is really like bad to me. I use this every day professionally. I have a shoot this Saturday. I can't bring this along. It's a paid corporate interview shoot. And there's no way that I'm going to have the camera freeze on me, lose all the recordings, and reset with the client 3, 4, 5, 6 times. It's just not going to happen. And that's not counting the autofocus issues, the overheating, and all the other stuff that I have in my other video. So I'm very happy for you if you're not experiencing any issues, but I am. And there's a lot of people just like me that are experiencing some, if not all, of these issues. So let me give you some background on my camera. This is a very early first release. I pre-ordered the Sony A7s3 as soon as it came out. So this is probably like one of the first ones that were shipped out. I got it the day that it was released. It was at my door the next day. So it was shipped and delivered to me the next day. Never had a single issue. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi were always working with firmware 2. And I know they were always working because I used them all the time to connect to my gimbal. And the camera was communicating with the gimbal, recording, all that stuff. No problems. Autofocus has always been amazing. It always locked on to people, never had an issue with autofocus, and I never had a single issue with overheating, and I kept it on the normal setting. Didn't matter if I was shooting outside, indoors, whatever. My second channel is all about cooking. You guys know this already. I have 2 channels. It's really my first channel. It's the larger channel. It's all about cooking. So this camera has been in very hot conditions, and it never overheated. I would use it in the kitchen, right? As chefs were cooking, as I was cooking and demonstrating things next to the barbecue, whatever. Now, within reason, I never damaged it, but it was in non-air conditioned environments where you would think it would overheat, and I never had any problems overheating. I never even felt it get warm to the touch, to be honest with you. I shoot on it 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second, you know, in burst modes, right? I don't continuously shoot in those, but the majority of the time I shoot in 24p for like talking heads and things like that. Never overheated. Now it's overheating no matter what. 24p, 60 frames, 120, doesn't matter, and it's very inconsistent. For example, 24 frames, it's overheating within the first 3 minutes of initial operation, turning the camera on, since it hasn't been used before, right? First time turning it on for the day, and it's overheating. And now we're experiencing no more audio with 3.5 millimeter, and it's randomly freezing. So let me tell you what Sony told me. After contacting Sony several times since firmware 3.0, with firmware 3.0, Sony basically told me, oh, this is very rare. No one's complaining about this, which I know is false because I've seen this being reported on Reddit and YouTube and all those other places. And they basically said, oh, it's a hardware issue. Send in your Sony camera. By the way, you're out of warranty, and we'll see what we can do. I said, that's a load of crap. I was working just fine. So after repeatedly calling them, finally got to a supervisor which told me, hey, 3.01's coming out very soon. It should fix all these issues. Hang tight. All right, 3.01 comes out. Didn't fix the issues. And all I had, by the way, was just a Bluetooth and Wi-Fi issue. So I called them and I say, hey, I'm having issues again. Didn't fix the Bluetooth or Wi-Fi issues. Again, it seems like the customer service reps are just regurgitating the same thing, because when you first talk to them about it, they say it's a hardware issue. Send in your camera. Finally get to a supervisor, referenced the other calls. I get told that my camera's broken. There's multiple hardware failures, and I need to send it in. Multiple hardware failures. He tells me he doesn't know what's wrong with it, but it's out of warranty. Likely the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi communications module will need to be replaced. It's likely that the processor will need to be replaced. It's this domino effect that's basically ruining all the features and functions of the camera, like autofocus and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, well, what about the 3.5 millimeter? He's like, yeah, it's all related. It's all connected. All right, well, let's just assume it's a hardware issue, Sony. How much is it going to cost? Oh, I can't quote you a price. We have no idea. We'd have to look at it. Just tell me. I don't want to send it in if it's going to be $3,000. He tells me it's probably going to be around $2,000, a couple $1,000, $2,000 to $2,500. Why would I send in my camera? Just buy a new camera at that point, right? And that it's a firmware issue, and Sony knows it's a firmware issue because they are releasing updates to fix the previous firmwares. And he didn't have anything to say to me. Look, it's not the Sony rep's fault. I get it. I mean, he's probably reading off a script, or he really doesn't know what's going on, and it is what it is. But Sony really has to own up to this. I've heard now it's no longer just the A7S3, it's now affecting the FX3 and even the A7 IV. To tell us it's a hardware issue is just a slap in the face, and now I am heavily considering switching to another brand. I am not married to a manufacturer. I don't care. I am not a Sony fanboy. I'm not a Canon fanboy, Red fanboy, whatever. I do what's best for me and my business. And before I bought the Sony A7S3, I was a Canon guy, and I have a bunch of Canon glass, including RF glass. I still have my Canon R, which ironically is replacing this temporarily for the moment until something else happens. Maybe getting the C70 or maybe getting the C400, new C400. And just saying goodbye to Sony. And it sucks to have to say this because I don't want to ignore all the good that this camera has done for me, but I don't know, Sony needs to work on their PR, because the first thing that you should do is own up to the mistake, if it is a mistake, and then let your customers know that it's being actively worked rather than gaslighting them. So that's it for me. I think this is going to be the last video. If there's other issues that come up, I'm just going to put them in the comments and pin them. The only video update that I'm considering doing is if it gets fixed, obviously. I want you guys to know if the next firmware fixes it or not, or if Sony's customer service owns up to this issue and fixes the camera. So leave me a comment below. Let me know what you guys are experiencing. I know there's a lot of you that have no issues. I'm happy for you. But for those of you that do have issues, I'm interested in finding out if this is going to get worse. That's it for me, guys. I'll talk to you later.